here, I'm Katie. Welcome. Please subscribe to my channel to get more content from me. Now, if you watched my videos before, you probably noticed that I am not in my usual filming space. My room is a mess, and trying to film in there just gave me anxiety, so we are filming in my grandma's room. That's what we're doing. And I don't know what this hair is doing. Just took a shower. I didn't feel like straightening it, but now all of this is getting frizzy. Drive me crazy. Okay. So, around June of 2018, my sister convinced my parents into fostering a dog from a local shelter. We fostered 2 dogs, actually. One was just for a weekend. They called it a slumber party. He was adopted the week after we fostered him. And the other one we had for several months. So, I'm going to be talking about what it was like to have a long-term foster dog. And this is our particular experience. I'm not going to say this is how everyone's experience is, because it's not. We've heard wonderful foster stories. This is just my family's experience, and yeah. So, we got Don Barclay, picture's gonna be right there, from a local shelter around June 15th of 2018. My mom and sister went into the shelter, and I'm not going to say what shelter, for privacy issues. And they went there to get a dog to foster. This is the shelter that we previously got our dog from. So we thought that since they gave us such a wonderful dog, that we would try to help them find a home for another wonderful dog. So they told the employees that we could not get a female dog because we currently have a female dog who doesn't really get along with other females that well, and we didn't think that we could handle like a super big dog. So our only requirements were male and not super big. That's it. So they completely ignored my mom's request and gave us the biggest dog they had in the entire shelter. Upon taking him home, they said he did not have heartworm. And I'm saying this not because it becomes relevant later on. And they didn't really know how old he was, and basically they sent them on their way. They didn't tell my mom how much he needed to be fed. Again, this becomes relevant later. And, or anything like that. It was, here's the dog, here's the crate, here's a bag of food, go. Like, get out of here. So, my mom and sister come home with an 89-pound dog. Now, Don needed to be in a foster home because being in the kennel environment was stressing him out to the point where he was losing hair. And, he had obviously, to us it was pretty obvious, been through some kind of trauma in his life because he had a long scar that went from one ear around his neck to the other ear. And, his foot was disformed. He had like a wonky toe. And his teeth were grinded down so far that they were barely even there. So it was really obvious that he needed some TLC. And although I love animals, especially dogs, I'm afraid of most animals. It's so stupid, but it's true. And so when my mom came home with the biggest dog in the shelter, I was scared. I was scared of him. Not that, he was gonna do anything to me, but just the fact that, he was a big dog, and, he was unpredictable because we didn't know anything about him. And I'm just scared of getting bit. Okay? But I sat on the ground outside. First thing he did is walk over and sit in my lap, and I was instantly in love with this dog. So, after I met him, my dad got home from work and met him. We introduced Don to our dog, Annie. And I was kind of nervous because Annie's, like, very particular in the type of dogs that she likes. She doesn't like dogs that, like, jump up in her face. She likes to be the one to initiate play, you know, the meeting of another dog. Like, she likes to be the boss. And I was nervous that since he was so big that she was not going to like him. And I really hoped that she would like him because, I mean, honestly, I had already fallen in love with him, but she was the final factor if he was going to stay, is because if Annie didn't like him, he had to go back. We would get a different dog. And the meeting went pretty well. He tried to mount her, okay? And she kind of freaked out a little bit. She, like, jumped away and, like, growled at him. Like, hey, buddy, don't do that. And he didn't do it again. He learned his lesson, and it was that moment that Annie fell in love with Don. Here's a picture of Don and Annie laying with each other. This is later in the summer when the fireworks are going off outside our house, and Annie's afraid of them, and she was shaking on the floor, and Don went over and laid behind her and started kissing her to help her feel better. He was an absolute sweetheart. I loved him. But upon the first night of having Don at our house, it was pretty obvious that he had abandonment issues, like very, very obvious. So the shelter told us that since my sister was the one that wanted to foster, so we decided that he was going to sleep in her room. We didn't really want him and Annie sleeping in the same place in case something went wrong, and we didn't really have a place for another crate in our living room, so into Maddie's room he went. So he would cry all night from his crate in Maddie's room. And she wouldn't usually lock him in there if she wasn't going to bed. And his cry wasn't exactly normal, but it sounded like one of those fireworks, you know, that like really low and then they get louder, the whine. And literally my sister had to lay with her hand inside the crate, like touching the top of his head, in order for him to settle down and go to sleep. The next morning, we realized they didn't give us instructions on feeding him. So, once they gave us the bag of dog food, we read the directions on the bag and gave him the amount it said for his weight. This is also relevant later. After a couple weeks, we noticed him having a hard time going to the bathroom. So we called the shelter. They told us to bring him up there, and they did. So getting this 90-pound dog into the car was difficult enough. But trying to control him while he was on the leash was like 10 times harder. And we couldn't handle it, just like she had told the shelter. You know, so we were frustrated because we had told the shelter we can't handle a big dog. And what do? Give us the biggest dog they had. So we take him up there, and they look at him. They give us some cream to put on him to help, and then they ask how much we're feeding him. And my mom tells them what the bag said, and automatically they're like, no, he needs half of that. Like, half of that. So keep in mind, Don was part Mastiff, and male adult Mastiffs can be up to, I think it was between 200 and 250 pounds. 200 and 250 pounds. And this dog was only 89 pounds, when dogs this breed can get up to 200 pounds. I mean, no, you could see his ribs, like, but since he belonged to the shelter, we had to do what they told us to do, and so we started feeding him half. So, while he was getting his checkup, my mom pointed out some things that we had noticed, and he was having a hard time walking around. We told them about the deformity of his foot, the shape of his teeth, and etc., because those are things that we were supposed to report. We also reported that he had like a really, really terrible cough and had a hard time breathing, and they completely dismissed everything. Throughout the 3 months that we had Don in our home, there were 3 different times that he got an adoption application. So we would have to take him up to the shelter, which again was super hard for us to do. And all 3 times the potential adopters failed to show up. And then the shelter said there was going to be an adoption event that Don absolutely had to be at. So my mom, dad, and sister took him to that. And they had to sit all day in the heat with Don lying in his crate, and he was crying all day. He was so anxious being there that he literally annoyed everybody there, and nobody wanted to look at him. I mean, he had a few people look at him, but, you know, because he was so anxious, they were just like, yeah, no. So, let me take a break from the facts to talk about how I was feeling during all this. I am very impartial to change. I hate change, absolutely hate it. And at this time, my anxiety and my depression were pretty wacky. Every time there was a potential adoption or an event they had to be at, like, I completely broke down. Like, I didn't want him to be adopted. I wanted to keep him. And by that point, like, I was so attached to him, it was ridiculous. But we couldn't keep him. He had so many health issues, and we couldn't afford it. And the shelter didn't really care to look into it and get him the help before he was adopted. So, around mid-September, the shelter calls my mom and tells her that Don had to go in to the vet for heartworm treatment. Let me repeat that. Heartworm treatment. Apparently, the whole time that we had him, he had a severe case of heartworm when they told us he didn't. So they put our dog at risk. I mean, our dog could have easily have gotten the heartworm from him. And then they made him suffer the whole summer with heartworm. So, why he was breathing so funny and coughing? Heartworm. So, my mom and I take him to the vet, drop him off for his treatment. And it goes fine, you know, it was hard getting him out of the car, but he was, willing to go with them right away. And, we're scheduled to pick him up in a couple days. The day that we're supposed to pick him up, the shelter calls my mom and says, actually, we're just going to pick him up and take him back to the shelter. Wait, what? What was that? What? The dog that was so severely anxious in a kennel environment just had a major treatment and needed to relax and stay calm. And then you wanted to take him back and put him back into a kennel environment? That didn't make any sense. But there's nothing we could do because he technically was the shelter's property. And yeah, it sucked because they just kind of ripped him away from us. And that was kind of insulting because, we had just spent 3 months giving this dog love and care and affection and running around like crazy when, adopters wanted to do and going to their events and all this, and then they just ripped him away from us. Yeah. we were the only people that he knew for 3 whole months. Like, he was happy. He probably thought that he had found his forever home. And the fact that we dropped him off at the vet and then never saw him again, I'm sure he felt abandoned all over again. And I can't even imagine how hard that must have been on him. I know how hard it was on me, and I understood what was going on, but for him, I can't even imagine. So about a month later, we're starting to get back to normal, living our life without Don, and the shelter calls my mom and asks if we can come back and get him. Excuse me, what? After all the crap that we were put through and how badly we were treated after taking care of their dog for 3 months, they wanted us to take him back? So my mom didn't tell my sister or me, because she knew that we would beg to go get him back, and after all the nights and days crying that we did after they took him back, she didn't want to do that. She didn't want to do that to us again. And I can't remember how long he actually stayed in the shelter before he got adopted. Shortly after he was adopted, my sister started volunteering at the shelter, which is a whole nother story in itself. And they treated her terribly. And a staff member told her about Don's adoption. So apparently, a friend of someone at the shelter had come up from Florida, saw him, wanted to take him back to be a boating dog. Again, what? This anxious, arthritic, humongous dog was going to spend his life on a boat? Yeah, right. The staff member also gave my sister the name of the adopters, so my sister went on Facebook and looked them up, naturally. And what she found out about him was absolutely heartbreaking. His new owner had gotten him back to Florida, renamed him, which, whatever, she got every right to. But what she said about him made me question, if it was even the same dog. She said he was very timid, wouldn't turn his back to them, wouldn't relax, didn't want anything to do with them, and was very unhappy. Which was really confusing because, we're talking about the same dog who loved to give kisses, and he wanted to cuddle, and he wanted to play, and he wanted to be in your lap all the time. And that was not what she was describing at all. The only thing I can think of as to why he was like that was because he was heartbroken. And, which is pretty sad. So my sister visited the new owner's page a couple weeks later, and the adopter was looking to rehome him. I have no idea what happened to him after that point. I don't even know if he's actually still alive, so it's pretty sad. He was an older dog. They said he was between 2 and 8, but really I think it was between 6 and 8. And with all his problems, 2 years later, I don't know if he would still be around. But the way that we were treated by the shelter, ignoring what we said we could handle, dismissing the things that we reported, lying to us about the heartworm, ripping him out of our house, was enough for my family to completely stop wanting to foster altogether. I've seen other people on their posts talk about how amazing the staff is and how attentive they are to the animals in foster care, but that's not our experience at all. We also did not have the same adoption experience as others have had at the shelter. So I don't know if they just didn't like us, or or what. My Girl Scout troop actually did a pet supply drive for them, and we barely got so much as a thank you. So we are done supporting that shelter. So yeah, that is our foster story. It was honestly one of the most stressful and saddest times in my life, and I don't think I'll ever be able to foster again because I get too attached. So yeah. Thank you for watching. Yeah, thank you for watching. Please give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel. Leave a comment down below your thoughts about this story. And I will see you guys next video.